Welcome friends to Farm Fresh Designs 59. In today's video, I'm going to be upcycling some old bottles that were in my mother-in-law's basement and a new technique. So let's get started. So before I get into the tutorial, I wanted to let you know that the bottles that I'm using tonight, I have already painted all of them with Dixie Belle Slick Stick, which is a really good product to use if you're going to be painting on glass or anything that, has a slick surface to it. And then after that set up, then I painted them with Rust-Oleum Chiffon Cream. So the mold that I'm using on this particular bottle is an IOD mold, and it's called Classic Elements. And it's really one of my go-to molds that I always seem to be drawn to. So I'm going to be doing the two larger pieces first, and I use DOS air dry clay. And a lot of times I find mine at Hobby Lobby, and just this past week they had it on sale. And unfortunately I wasn't able to get there and get some because I know that when I've looked on Amazon it's a lot more expensive. So when I make my molds, I press them in, and then I like to use an old gift card to smooth out the back side of it so that it just seems to go on a little bit better. But I put cornstarch in the mold first, and that helps them to release and not stick. So I'm going to be using Titebond glue on all my different molds tonight, and it's the Titebond Thick and Quick, and it's in the blue and the gray bottle, and it sets up really fast. And then I put it all over the backside, and I like to use like a little silicone stick because I'm not one of those people who likes glue on my fingers. So you'll see me using these sticks a lot. Now, what I like to do is lay it down and then put something on either side because it's going to roll around. So the first one is that real big swirly part, and then the other one right up underneath it is, I don't know, it kind of mimics sort of like a crown. It's got a real big point to it, and I love it. And then there's also some different pieces on this mold, and they kind of look like, I guess what you would describe as like parentheses. And I'm using those on both sides. Now, one of the mistakes that I made is after that side set up, I didn't wait long enough before I put on the ones on the other side, and it kind of smushed out just a little bit. And what I was doing a while ago was I like to take just a real soft bristle brush, and I like to dust off that cornstarch if I still have some on it. Now, what I'm using now is Dixie Belle Sea Spray. It's something that I got recently. I know a lot of creators use salt wash, but it's just not available in my area. And this is, I always get my Dixie Belle, and it's just real close. So I put that over all of the bottles. And then I paint this one with Dixie Belle French Linen. And I have to put a couple coats on it because honestly, a lot of times when you paint it the first time, after it dries, you go back and you see some different spots that you missed. So I clear coated all of it, and then I'm detailing all of that trim with Deco Art Metallics, and it's called Pearl, and it's sort of a creamy paint, and it's real sparkly, and it has a really soft glimmer to it. So I just dry brush that over all of the different pieces that I have put on that mold. Now, one of the things that I did not show you was up at the top, I put one right on the neck of the bottle. Now I'm going to be making some different molds, but what I'm doing right now is I need only part of that mold that has the little point to it. So a friend of mine suggested this. So I used my hot glue gun to kind of make like a little barrier for it before I put the resin in it so that the resin doesn't run down the mold. And I use amazing casting resin that sets up in about 10 minutes. And I also buy that at Hobby Lobby because it's cheaper than getting it off of Amazon. And so when it's a 1-to-1 ratio, and when you put it in, it sets up in about 10 minutes. And when I get ready to pull it up out of the mold, then I just very gently pull off that hot glue, and then that way it came out the way I wanted it. Now, this is something that I want to show you. This is just some wire, and I believe it's 24 gauge, and I wrap it around my fingers about 3 or 4 times, and then I go back and I twist it, kind of twist it going down, because I want it to be really strong. And then once I get to the bottom, then I twist it back up to the top. And I can't wait to show you what I do with it. Now, you could also use some thicker wire, but this was the heaviest wire that I had at the time. And then I just snip it off after that. And that's what it looks like. So I have done my hot glue on that mold again, and I'm pouring in another one. But look, I put that little wire piece inside of it, and then that mold that's already set up, then I put that on top. And then I clamp it together because there's a little gap in it. So I made 2 of these. I made one that was the full mold and then one that was the half the mold. And this is a bottle stopper. And it already had 2 little holes in it. So I push those in and push the wires through, and then I twist them down at the bottom. And look, we have a bottle stopper. And we made it with resin molds and just some wire. It was so simple. And so I was so excited to show y'all this because I haven't seen anybody make anything like this before. And so here's the finished product. But you can see that metallic paint and how it shimmers just a little bit. I did not put it over the rest of the bottle because I wanted it to only be highlighted on those molds. So what do you think? And what do you think about this bottle stopper? I am in love with it. And it's just 2 molds that are exactly the same, but one is the full mold and then one is the half mold. And I painted it exactly the same way as I did in the bottle. So if you are enjoying the video so far, make sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and become part of our family. Okay, are you ready for another bottle? Now, I think this was like a vinegar bottle. So I started out with the Cameo mold, and the frames mold, and I put that probably my most favorite frame on it, and I use air dry clay on this. Now you'll notice that the paint is kind of pulled off in some spots. Well, that was because I put a different mold on it and I didn't like it, so I pulled it off and I pulled the paint off. But it's going to be covered up, so it was fine. Now, on top of that frames, then I pull out on the Cameo mold, and all of these are IOD molds. And this is the largest Cameo, and I put that on top of that frames mold, and it fits perfectly. Now, the next mold that I'm using is called the Olive Crest, and there's just a lot of little swirly pieces in there that I'm going to be using, and I use my DOS air dry clay. Now, if you'll notice, the bottle is setting up, and it is because that air dry clay has been sitting on it long enough to where I can actually stand it up and not lay it down. And I'm just going to be using different pieces of this particular mold. And those are the pieces that I start out with. And I'm putting some up at the top, and then I'm going to go around the sides of that frame and Cameo, and then I will finish it off down at the bottom. Now, one of the things I like to do is once those molds have set up for just a little bit, I like to go back and very gently go ahead and paint over them, and that helps to keep it from cracking. But you do have to be super careful with that so that you don't mess up any of the details of the mold. And with these particular molds, there's no set pattern to the different pieces. You just kind of work with it, and it always just seems to look right because they all fit together so well. Now, I don't paint the bottom of the bottles because I wanted to wait until I got all through before I did that, because I was afraid that the bottom would scratch some. And then I'll let that lay there for just a little bit until those set up. Now, once it's all dry, then I go back with Dixie Belle Tea Rose. And also, just a reminder, I used that Dixie Belle Sea Spray on this. And when I first put it on, it was a little bit thicker than what I wanted. So I did take just a dry brush, and I kind of brushed it to one side and then to the next. And I know that you can use it more if you want those peaks and valleys, but I realized after I put it on that I wanted it to be a little bit flatter than what it was. And I go over the whole bottle with the tea rose. And then I go and I put a clear wax on it from Dixie Belle. And then I'm using the Dixie Belle wax that's brown. And you have to put on the clear wax first before you put on the dark wax, or it's going to be hard to pull that dark wax off if you don't like it. And then I just wipe it over with a shop towel, and I let it sink down in the crevices. And then finally, I'm using the DIY gold gilding wax, and it's called Golden Rule. And once again, I just go over a lot of the details on this, and I believe I'd still go back and do a little bit more on the whole bottle. Now, here is another bottle stopper, but this one is from the Baubles mold, and I did it the same way. I did the resin, and then I think on this one I went on and put the wire in it before I put the second one on top of it to set it up, and it's double-sided. And I just think it turned out so cool. And then I'm also going to stick that in just like an old bottle stopper. And I go through that same technique. I paint it with the tea rose, and then I put clear wax on it, and then I put brown wax on it, and then I go back with the gold gilding wax. And then I will put it inside of that bottle. And I just love the way that it turned out. Now, I know that Teresa on Our Green Acres uses Totally Dazzled, and I didn't have any of those, but you'll see what I do to kind of spice it up just a little bit. Now, this is just up at the top right there. You can see it. It's just a little rhinestone piece, and I've just glued that on with Titebond glue, and that was just something I had in my stash. But look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Now, it looks a little bit darker in this light, but it's not quite so dark in person. But that tea rose just looks so pretty with that brown wax, and then to top it all off with the gold gilding wax. So what do you think about this one? I love it. This has been so much fun to making these bottles for this video today. And then there's your Baubles mold. And all of the different bottle stoppers that I'm doing today are double-sided. All right, so the next bottle that I'm using, I really don't know what it was for, but it was beautiful and it had such a pretty design on it. And so on this one, I'm also using all the air dry clay, and I'm using the IOD Primitive mold. And this is the only mold that I will use on this one. And I use a lot of the pieces on this particular mold, but I'm not really sure what kind of mold what kind of bottle it was, but it just had such a pretty design on it. So I start out with the flower in the middle, and then those little stems over on either side. Now this bottle it looks like it's round, but it's kind of, the front and the back is a little bit squared off, so it doesn't roll like the other ones do. And down at the bottom, there was just like a little flower, and I put it on top of those two little stems to try to kind of put something right there in the middle to finish it off. And then up at the top, I put the two little birds up at the top with some other little small stems up at the top. Now this is a much smaller bottle, and it kind of reminds me maybe it might have been like a mayonnaise bottle or something, but I did not have the lid for this particular one. And there's what it looks like right there. Then on this one, I used Dixie Belle Sea Glass. And I love this color. It's such a pretty spring green color. Now, I need to make a bottle topper for this one, but this one's going to be a little bit different than the other ones where I use kind of like a cork. So I'm going to be using that same primitive mold, and there's one long piece down at the bottom, and I make 3 of those. Now, this is actually the bottom of like a little tin, but it mimics the top of a bottle. And then I put I put 3 of them on and get those set up with Tite Bond glue. And on this one, for the bottle, I did a double-sided tulip with a little wire in it. And then watch how I do this. These are the little smaller leaves or the stems. And I made them with resin. And I put a little bit of Tite Bond glue on it and just a dab of hot glue, and just so it'll stick real quick. And then I'm going to have those kind of sticking up, and then they meet in the middle. Haven't put my tulip on yet. Now that was a lot of work. I wasn't really sure if this one was going to come out or not. And then I used a little bit of Tite Bond glue to kind of pinch them together. So this one is a little bit different than the other ones, and maybe because it's, not such a fancy bottle, and it's just a lot different. And so I put my clear wax on it, and then initially had started to put some brown wax on it, and then I didn't like it. So I went back and I painted it all over again, and then I put the white wax on it again. I'm sorry, the clear wax. And then after that, then I put the white wax on it. And I put it on pretty heavy. And I love the way that it turned out, because I think that the white wax just softens up that green so much. And I just love this bottle. I think it's so, so pretty. And then that little bottle topper, you'll see it right over to the right-hand side. I've already got it painted with the sea glass, and I use the same steps for that. I paint it with the clear wax, and then I go back over it with the white wax. Now, if you didn't want to make a bottle topper for this one, this would make a beautiful vase to put some flowers in, whether it's like faux flowers or just real regular flowers. But look at the design on that. And then that is like a little button that I had, and I just glued that right in the middle. And I love this one too. I don't have a favorite with all of these because they were all so different and so much fun to make. And we've always got bottles in our house. So these aren't really thrift flips. These are just some old bottles that I found in the basement when we were cleaning out my mother-in-law's house. Because she canned a lot, and so she always had lots of bottles, and she made pickles, so she used a lot of vinegar. And so I was able to pick up several bottles from her house. But I love this one, and I really struggled with whether to do this one or not because the particular design on just the bottle itself. But I love the way it turned out. So what do you think about this one? And which one has been your favorite so far? Okay, so now I want to put just some sort of like French country or French provincial sign to go back behind them and kind of tie it all together. So I just had like an old sign that I had painted a while back, and I actually used spackling to kind of brush over it and just to give it an uneven surface. And then I painted it with Rust-Oleum chiffon cream. It's up there on the left. This is something I've had in my stash for a while, and I've just kind of been waiting to use it. Now, this is a redesign with Prima mold that I just got, and it's called Enlightened Etchings. And so I put the top of it up at the top of the sign, and then I put the bottom of it down at the bottom of the sign. And then the mold in the middle was the IOD Laurel mold, with the crown. And if you'll look right above the crown, I took just a little bit of that laurel wreath, and I just made just the very top of it, just to put like a little top up at right up at the where it meets together. And then once it was all dry and I painted it all with Rust-Oleum Chiffon Cream, then I'm using Dixie Belle Voodoo Gel Stain. Now, I didn't want to do a really dark on this one, and so I'm using the Voodoo Gel Stain that's called Natural, and then I love it. I love the way it turned out, but I added a little bit of the Dixie Belle Tobacco Road, but just enough. And a viewer had suggested a good while back to try this natural stain, and I haven't tried it all by itself, but on this one I thought, well, I'll just try it, and oh my goodness, I love it. I can't believe I've waited this long to just use it pretty much by itself, but even though it just has like just a little bit of Tobacco Road in it, just to give it a little bit of darkness. And then I just went over all of the molds. Now, one of the things that I did not get was I took the IOD Vintage Textures, and then there is like a crackle stamp in there. And so I just kind of did a little bit of stamping here and there to look like there was some cracking on it. And you'll be able to see at the end. And then I just go over all of it and brush it on. And then I go ahead and use a baby wipe and kind of wipe it back off. And then that way it settles into the details of those molds. And this is just something to sit behind all of my bottles today. Just something really simple, but look at that. Isn't that just beautiful? I am in love. And there's the Vintage Texture stamp that I used. I just used a little bit, just a little bit here, a little bit there, because sometimes I tend to get started and then I do too much. So I tried to go a little bit easy on this one. But I thought it would be pretty to sit behind all of my bottles today. So what do you think? There's a lot of work put into this video, and I'm so excited for it to be done, because it was a lot of work. But I'm so excited to show you what you can do with your molds. Not only can you just put them on old bottles, but look, you've got a new way to make a bottle stopper. Now, I'm not, I don't drink wine, but, some of you may. And think about it. You could make your own corks for your wine bottles. Isn't that a really cool idea? So it doesn't just have to be on this sort of bottle that's just decorative. You could make these bottle stoppers, and then you could give them away as gifts at Christmas time. And so I just think it was really neat that it turned out so good. I wasn't real sure how it was going to work, and it was something that I've kind of been pondering about and thinking, what am I going to do to make these molds stand up? Well, that's what I did. So in the comments below today, make sure to tell me what was your favorite piece. I do not have a favorite. And have you ever seen somebody make those with the molds with the wire in it and make bottle stoppers? I've been looking and I haven't seen anybody make these. So once again, if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and become part of our family. And I will see you in my next video.